Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can click on the little link below and end up in Zoom. If you're watching in Zoom, click on the little link down below and end up in Mokana. And then you can ask questions. You can chat with other folks. You can vote on those questions. All of those things are available to you. If you think that you could actually answer these questions, if you think you can be part of the panel, we would love to have you. So if you think that you have something unique, it's not a matter of knowing as much as any one person here. Every person brings their unique background, their unique, production history to this. I think a lot of us sound better because we're part of this huge community that can answer those questions. And so definitely we would like to have you be part of that. If you have some skill sets, join our panel. You just have to be here early. 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time is when you need to get here. We do the mic checks then. If you feel like you want to check your mic, if you want to see if it's going to work, if you want to check your video, just show up a little early. We open the doors at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we can kind of work through that and see if you're ready to roll. At 7 o'clock, of course, we start the general questions. Any question that you have around media production or virtual production, and you really are the producer. So if you're watching, this is your show. So you have to decide what we're going to talk about, when we're going to talk about it, and the way you do that is ask those questions and to vote on the questions up and down. We've got a lot of stuff in the second hours. Today, we're going to be starting a trip through AWS. How do we get started? Why would we want to do this? And where do we go from that? So Jeff Keithley, Guy Cochran, and my brain just turned off. Tucker Dragoo will be helping us work through some of those things right now in the second hour. So if you have questions for the second hour, tag them as such. Tag them as questions for the second hour. That gives Tucker, Jeff, and Guy a little bit of time to look at them, think through them, think about how they're going to be ready for that, as well as us knowing what question comes next and not pushing the first hour in the second hour. So make sure to tag those in the second hour. It's going to be great. Tomorrow is a long day. We've got a lot of things planned. So education for the after the first hour, we'll have education for 2 hours because we always have a lot to talk about. Then we're doing Resolve at 10 a.m. Remember, it's the color page that we're going to be talking about. So if you have questions about the color page in Resolve, that's what you want to come with tomorrow. So definitely. And if you look at the emails that we sent out, there's actually a link to specifically to a Mukana where you can ask questions even today about the color page and get kind of off the races. We also are building a Raspberry Pi at noon. So we're going to build up Playout B on a Raspberry Pi. It's something we're experimenting with, all of us building something together over Zoom. So it's going to be a long day as we kind of figure through all of those things. We will have breaks, don't worry. And also there's some links of what you can buy. I don't know if it'll get to you in time now, but if you want to, otherwise just follow along as we move through that. If you actually want to share what we're doing, the more the merrier. The bigger we get, the more fun we have. The more experts we get, the more folks that want to come talk to us. Go ahead and post that link that I put in there. Don't use your own. All right, who's doing the Q&A? Is Chris? Are you? Is Chris? For some reason,
I could jump in.
You want to jump in? Okay, good.
Sure. First question is from Brian Bavito from Detroit, Michigan. He says, Alex, when Shannon or other members of your team are assisting with kit setups, do you call out starting points for lighting placement, for example, a certain distance above and to the side of the lens?
Yeah, I mean, the rule of thumb is that we generally, with one light, we'll have it right in front of them. With two lights, we'll kind of spread it out. We want kind of even lighting on folks for the most part. It tends to, someone's got a little extra audio coming in here. I don't know. That's great. Yeah. You have one light coming in the front or two lights, but we want it to be even. I think a lot of people want dramatic lighting, but for the most part, for a online event, we want everyone to kind of look similar to each other. So that kind of generalized lighting is where we go. We generally have the light go up until as far as it can go, where we still get some highlights on the eyes. So as soon as it goes over that, where we're not getting highlights on the top of someone's eyes, then we know that we've gone too high. But it's as high as we can go in that angle, usually a couple feet in front. We want the lights to be as close as we can get them generally, so that the closer the light and the larger the light, the softer it's going to be on the person. So those are the kind of some of the general rules that we have as we start to kind of place that. It's not super artistic. It's pretty technical. Just like, hey, we want this to look this way. Everyone looks relatively good that way. We oftentimes, for larger events, we may tweak it a lot more, but in general, as we're working through people who've never done this before, those are some of the general rules. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, I've seen some pretty clever ways of like, if you're asking somebody to do it remotely, where you could like lay out, like a pattern on the floor and say, put one light stand here and put one light stand there.
We for the larger kits, I mean, for this, I'm thinking about smaller kits where we send out a stand, like a little light stand. We use these little, I think, newer stands that you can set on your desk, or we have some larger light ones. When we do the larger kits that we have that have 6K cameras and so on and so forth, we actually have braided wire that has a loop on it. And it hooks onto the front of the tripod, and you pull it straight out, and it's got a little piece of tape on it. And then you put another braided wire across it that has, and you just and they have little like kind of weights at the ends. And we say, just put the camera over the two lights over top of that, and put the chair over top of the end of the one that went straight out from the tripod, and that defines our distance as well as where the lights go, and that gets everybody looking the same. I mean, does it look as good as if I had a DP? They're working on it, probably not, but it definitely makes everybody look reasonably good on a day-to-day basis. Any other questions about that? All right, next question.
Jonas says, Dotel from Reutlingen says, what is the best tally system for an Atem Constellation?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Scarhoy, hands down.
Scarhoy.
Scarhoy, best stuff on the market for that.
Yeah, Scarhoy has, so Scarhoy it's SKAAR
SKAARHOJ.
Yeah, HOJ. Scarhoy.
Nobody's really sure.
He says it. He says it at the beginning. Welcome to Scarhoy. And so they've got great videos on it, and those are definitely the tallies. Now, a lot of the cameras, the Blackmagic cameras, have the tallies built into them, and so you can actually get the cameras, the screens. There are stuff that's built into the cameras, but as a separate tally unit, Jeff's absolutely right. The Scarhoy stuff is the best. Go ahead, Tucker.
If you're using Unity, Unity does have Unity Intercom does have a tally interface built in that works with the Blackmagic equipment as well as many, many others. So it's also another very interesting use case. But
that's interesting. I've seen it. I just haven't used it. It's interesting. Next question.
Also from Jonas, when setting the keyframe intervals in the XMI for an Atem Mini to 0, would that mean every frame is an iframe? Has someone tested that?
Wow, that's a pretty technical question around that, and of something that we just haven't tried. I think that setting it to 0, if you're in compressing, generally sets it to natural keyframes. So if you set it to 1, it would be every frame. If you set it to 0, 0 in many things just says make it, you do what you think is best. Like automatic, no limit. 0 doesn't usually mean 0. It means like I'll leave it up to you. So so when you set most things to 0, when you set compressors to 0, it generally means if a lot changes, I'm going to drop a keyframe. And if not very much changes, I'm just going to not put a keyframe until I see a lot change. And you can end up seeing a little bit of tearing if you don't have something regularly happening. The thing that with natural keyframes is if you pan slowly, it takes a little while for it to realize that you panned over, and it'll start tearing up because it doesn't have that data. So you have to be careful of 0 on especially motion graphics because they are moving oftentimes very slowly. Next question.
Laura Seal from Greensboro says, outside of YouTube annotations, what would you use to create a clickable button overlay in an MP4? And can those buttons link to playhead positions within the same video?
Unfortunately, this technology was moving pretty fast in the 2000s, and then got kind of depreciated. Everyone, there's something that happens in our industry often, in many industries. People get a great idea. They're way ahead of their time. They do a bunch of testing, they talk about it, and then they give up. They're like, oh, that didn't work because all the pieces weren't in place. And then they just don't go back to it. And now we're like, okay, we have all the tools and we don't have what you're offering. And I think that one of the things that we saw here is like QuickTime used to have that all built into it. So you get a QuickTime player. We did tons of R&D in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004. We actually had a whole team within Pixel Core that was just doing this, of putting overlays, interactive overlays over movies, where you could click on it and it would take, I think we talked about this earlier this week. You could click on someone's sweater and it would, like Brad Pitt's sweater in Ocean 11, it would take you to a web page. That would do that. I have not seen very many tools that are openly available on the web that the average consumer could use that would have that. Go ahead, Laura.
What I'm looking to do is create a DVD-like experience for the viewer. Is there anything that will allow the viewer to navigate around like that?
And you want that, so it's not so much you want to click on things that are being traced. You just want buttons that they can click on, while they're, while they're experiencing it.
I wanted to know if there's a way to allow them to jump to different places in a video.
So it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to interact with the video. We're not rotoing video or anything else. You just need buttons that take them to another place in the video. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
That's correct.
Okay, Jeffrey.
So one thing you can do in YouTube, of course, that's why we have the chapter markers, is you can click right on the timestamp and that'll take you to that point. If you take that text and actually bring it to a web page, it'll bring all the links with it. Now, I suppose you could write some sort of script with a button that once it passes a certain time, that'll go to the next time link and go from there. But you need to figure out how to code that. But you could put the bottom line is you could put those chapters into any type of blog or something like that, where they can just click and move to the next one. That's the closest I can think of.
Yeah, I have not. It's been one of those things that everyone keeps on trying. Everyone kind of knows that it's going to be a thing, and everyone keeps on failing. like that's the thing, and it's been hard to get the standardization. Even YouTube used to have a lot. We had all those a lot more stuff that was available that took out. Go ahead, Chris.
Media 100 actually had a whole scripting thing in the timeline 22 years ago, where you could define areas, make a click point. It could take you to a URL. It could do everything you wanted to do 22 years ago.
And we all know it's happening. You're on the right path, Laura.
Any day now, 22 years in the making.
We all know that it's going to happen, that we're going to watch video. We can click on the video. I mean, the team that we had internally at Pixel Core was called the REI team, because specifically we thought that REI would be the perfect, company to do that. And the idea was you just watch someone camping and they're just using a bunch of REI tools, and they just show you how to make a fire, how to go camping or whatever. And you could click on any item that they're talking about and jump to REI and buy it. And we just haven't seen, that was, 17, 18 years ago that we thought that it was, that we were like, this is going to be the future. We just haven't, that future hasn't occurred yet, but it will. It absolutely will. Go ahead, Tyler.
How come is there? I mean, this is just kind of like an extension of this question, but like in the 2010 era, my family had this DVD player that would censor cuss words, and certain things in a DVD player, it would read the subtitles and then censor out. Why is this not a feature built into YouTube for, say, kids as an extra added?
I know, because the creators get super excited, super upset. That's I mean, there was a lot of services that would let you, for instance, as a parent, buy DVDs that had all the naughty scenes taken out of them, and filmmakers just went ballistic, and so it became a big issue. And so that's why that's happened. But one of the big problems with a lot of these things, as far as supporting interactive, really has to do with the players. All these players are different. Microsoft's player is different than the Chrome player versus there is the Apple player. Then you have, there's so many different players. And so when you go into a specific player, that player has to do it. And the company that is most positioned to do this is Apple, and they dropped all their interactive stuff out of their players, 15 years ago. Steve Jobs decided he didn't think it was important, got rid of that team, and got rid of all the cool things that QuickTime had, got rid of QuickTime 7, not that all of us are still bitter. And so that's where that went, is that's the one company that could probably unify more than anyone else, and they're not playing. So not that, we're upset. or bummed, but it will come. I mean, it's definitely going to happen. Courtney.
I look into VLC Player because it's cross-platform and it does allow you to create custom bookmarks by, I think, hitting Control+V from any point within the video.
Yeah, there's all these players that do it, but if you're trying to do a distribution, unless you can get everybody to do it, that's the hard part.
Yeah, and then you can create a button to tie it to that bookmark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next question.
Dave Chalmers from Glasgow, Scotland says, for a Zoom webinar, what's the panel's preferred method of handling private talkback into a presenter's ear? Tucker, do you want to take this?
I very much like to use Unity for that. I've got several workflows that involve either Unity directly to them, so they have a Unity instance that they're talking on, or there's a workflow that allows you to basically tie Unity to Zoom in a way where they can listen back. There's also a really creative use that I think Alex brought up of using the translate channels for that, which is very, very interesting.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I agree with Tucker about Unity as one option, or just a comm system in general that has the ability to input audio into your Zoom workflow. We use VCOM primarily now. VCOM actually has NDI audio out as an application out. So now we can actually integrate that with our Sienna processing engine workflows and bring that directly into the channel as a true IFB, or which is, ducking program or something that's layered on top.
Yeah, and really the way to make that work oftentimes is to you do need some kind of mix minus available, so point-to-point connections if you're going to do it through Zoom. So you're not, of course, doing comms to everyone. So point-to-points to Zoom have been the way we do that, or the way we set that up. And so that way we can embed an additional layer of audio on top of what's coming back to them. That's the easiest way to do it for the user. Harder for us, but easiest way for the user. Go ahead, Chris.
I'd like to point out to our friends at Zoom that this conversation is happening right now at 17 minutes into the show, and it would be really cool if there was a way that they could just build it into somebody's feed.
Yeah, I have to admit that there's so many things for Zoom to fix. What I'm more interested in, I've stopped asking Zoom to do things and kept pushing that, hey, we just really need to open the SDK. Now that we know Andy, I just keep on going, just make the SDK more powerful. Just spend all your resources on making a great API and a great SDK, and let people customize Zoom, and stop, just work on the core application and make sure that it's great. Because them adding all these features, I think that we're so niche that we would get what we wanted faster if we just let external folks do it. But making sure that it's stable, making sure that they have all the hooks they need, I think is probably more important for like real production solutions. I think that they would go a lot further that way. They're already going down that path. We just want them to go faster. But I've ceased to think about, like, in high end production, I've ceased to worry about whether they're going to add it, and more of a like, are there hooks there for Andy to add it or somebody else? Go ahead, Beju.
As an extension to this, like sometimes when you're talking about your presenter, if he's talking, it might disturb his flow. Do any of you like sending back text on their screen as a display to just give them a cue mark or something rather than speaking directly in their ear? And what's the workflow for that, maybe?
So we do that. We're beginning to do that now because Zoom has fixed the one problem that we had, which was that we now have the ability for it to just show an unseen participant, which means if someone drops out of Zoom, or if they pause their video, their return doesn't show up on our point-to-point machines on our Zoom rooms, which is what was a problem up until a couple weeks ago. And so now what we can do is it'll always just show their name, or it'll go black if they drop out. And so that's a much better solution for us. And so as a result, we are starting to send more return, or we're designing more returns for those things, where we use we're using a super source out of an Atem to do it, but you can design it, lay it out like, this is what we want. I want, your return feed and the program feed, and I want, text below it that is possibly, being just supered in there, which could be as simple as a Google Doc, but it could have a lot of other information. So we're kind of building that into a solution. I think that the thing that we're more interested in doing as we move forward is using things like Zoom OSC to have a designed interface so that the person on the far end has an interface that is specific to what we need and doesn't require any video return and ties all the information into it that we want to return. But you're absolutely right. It is important not to talk to people while they're talking, but having information up there, that can be the run of show, that can be, a lot of other things there that are important. Next question.
James from Dublin, Ireland says, what tools do the panel recommend for displaying Facebook comments on screen?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I come from a little bit more of a broadcast background, so I will use tools that are broadcast related and then put that into our workflow. So that might be Expression, CharacterWorks, New Blue Effects actually has a great tie-in with their upper level broadcast packages, but CharacterWorks for sure is one of the easiest. It's $2,500, but it is a broadcast tool, and so you do have a learning curve with that.
Go ahead, George.
Question, Jeff, are you does CharacterWorks have a NDI inside of it? I know New Blue
In and out.
push NDI. No?
Yes. In
Okay.
and out, both
In and
inputs
out.
and outputs. So you can actually nest NDI inputs coming into as inputs, overlay it. So it can be your compositor. So it could either be downstream or it could be upstream, depending on what you need in your switcher setup.
Go ahead, Doug, and then Jeffrey.
Yeah, Jeff turned me on to CharacterWorks, and it is a really powerful CG. It can read an Excel file. It can pull off a Google Sheet. It could even pull like live data off a website if you find the programming and can do it right. For the cost, you get the $40,000 expression or $2,500 and some work into it. But yeah.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Some of the new streamers and stuff like that are going through things like Restream or StreamYard or other web-based switchers, which then bring in the Facebook comments so they can do the moderation right there and bring them in as lower thirds.
And as you get started, we haven't found that the positive people like the graphics. We don't find that that provides any more positive reinforcement than listing off the person's name and reading out the comment. It is a structure that broadcast uses. Like we do here, we don't read we don't put the graphic up. We've tested it before with and without, and we haven't seen any significant change in behavior to have us believe that posting the comments makes that much of a difference, other than adding some production value. So you when you're getting started, mostly worry about the most important thing is saying their name and their location. John.
My dog's going crazy. vMix and Wirecast, all of those software switchers will also pull in. My dog is telling me in my ear.
Yeah. Right. All right. Next question.
Eddie Martinez from Sacramento, California says, anyone have experience with Disguise Designer? I think that's Disguise, right? For mixed reality shows. How would you incorporate this into Zoom? And he had a URL with a link to this page.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Just so happened to be in the middle of a Disguise project last week. A little thing for some talking guy. He talks a lot. And as we were going through it, I started getting deeper and deeper into it. They had moved over to Disguise from Unreal. But basically, Disguise is originally it was more for display, but when I say display, like for event display, it was handling large screen sizes, LED screens and such like that. So now they've pivoted and they've done very well. You wouldn't use Disguise going into Zoom necessarily. You could, but it's really designed more for the display side. So they're using Zooms into Disguise and then showing that on a very large wall of LED.
So it would be similar to something like a Ventus or a Universe, those types of kind of programmable projection systems.
No, not at all. No, it's more about handling the pixels. Yeah, it's nothing interactive or anything that.
Well, no, but Ventus is just a handling pixels. Like it's just a multi-screen, system that was used. It's used a little in broadcast. I'm sure that they wish they had gotten faster into broadcast than they have. Go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, it's Disguise is like the the way more developed version of Dataton Watchout or Pixera and that sort of thing. So it's a media engine that's for putting the information out there. And yeah,
Would
it's
that be
typically
would that be
the
similar
beautiful.
to would that be similar to Resolume?
It is like Resolume would love to be Disguise. Disguise is what every tour that you ever see that has insane projection happening.
Right.
It's Disguise. If it's super polished, it's Disguised. If it looks like it's like, oh, there's a VJ somewhere, that's Resolume.
Okay, got it. Okay, very good. All right, well said. All right, next question.
Ouch. Okay, Guy Cochran from Seattle says, Zoom interview streamed live out to YouTube. What will you do to pretty it up and make it look more like a broadcast?
And are you doing it live or are you doing it in post? Whoop. Chirag, while Guy's pulling that up, you go ahead.
Sure. So we do a lot of this. So we do vMix Cloud. So you could obviously do vMix locally, but the power of the cloud. Obviously, we're going to talk about that later. But you could do overlays direct. You could ISO them out. vMix Call is a really good option too. Also, you could do it with OBS as well if you're looking for something nice and cheap.
Go ahead, George.
Didn't know if he said live or pre-recorded, but definitely if it's pre-recorded, we do a lot of those and we just put them into super sources, 2 up, 3 ups, whatever the case may be. So we've definitely doing a ton of pre-recorded Zooms and pushing them back out of the super sources.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, this would be live. It's basically just talking heads 2, 3 up, up to usually 2 or 3 up, and then a slide deck, some kind of just graphic. So what are people using?
Go ahead, Tucker.
I would say, just as a point of reference, check out what Greg Gibson does. His work is absolutely beautiful, and it is very much a workflow like this. So check it out.
And for what we do is, number one is we spend a lot of time making sure that the people on the far end have some equipment, lighting, a good camera, sound and look good. I think one of our frustrations is having someone who has like a misty webcam and doesn't sound very good, and then we're trying to wrap them with a super source that looks gorgeous. Is a little bit of a downer. And so, broadcast has gotten us used to looking at that, but it doesn't have to be that way. So we spend a lot of time on making sure that they look and sound good. We also have really begun to make sure that they're running through proc amps. So whether if you have a software one like vMix or whatever, but we're starting to run everybody through proc amps. This, in our case, it's a FS, FS HDRs because we have them, but FS 4s, which allow us to do pretty fine color control over every input. So now what we can do is when someone comes in and we're not happy with the way that they look, we can, crush the blacks, extend the whites, change coloration, all that for every person that's coming in. And so being able to do those fine tuning, those are just kind of, basic ball handling skills as far as everyone having good video and good audio. Then we start adding the super sources and, those types of things. I don't do a lot of things that are moving just because a lot of things don't compress well. So I still do some of that, but you just have to keep in mind that you really want to test it on the platform that you're going to stream it to. But nice super sources that go around that, and then just really being conscious that putting up a slide for any long period of time is devastating to a live stream. So, figuring out ways that you're going to go in and out of that slide. If you can rehearse it, it's even better if they're going around those slides, so you just know what they're going to do. And then some of it's wetware of trying to persuade people to build a visual set of slides they can talk to, as opposed to filling it with words, because the words will no one will read them, or they'll read them and not be listening to them. But it's one of those two. They're either not listening to the speaker, or they're not reading the words, but they're not doing both. And so having really clear content that is visually underlining what they're talking about takes a little bit of thought process on the creation side, but will be a much better show. The best thing to do is watch a lot of Nova. What are they doing with their graphics? Chris?
I found it interesting that you said you had to actually insert a proc amp into the chain. The Atem doesn't have any way of tweaking an input at all?
No, we can tweak the cameras coming into it, but you can't do. It would be great if it just did some kind of proc. I mean, it should be able to. We wished it would, but it doesn't. You know, the way to color it is to run it through something else. So we have 4 channels per FS4 or FS-HDR that we run them all through, and then we can sit there. And what's nice about that also is that I can have someone log into those from anywhere in the world, sit there and tweak the colors as needed. Next question.
The next question is from Dave Chalmers from Glasgow, Scotland. I need to key 6 different NDI graphics key fill sources onto 6 different SDI sources to add live locator graphics to outside broadcast feeds. Any smart way to do it other than to have a big giant vision mix switcher?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Simple way we did this last week already. We did 4, but there's no limit. Sienna processing engine, hands down, is just super simple. You can bring the NDI feeds in, do whatever you want with them, send them back out, either NDI or baseband if you need to go out to SDI for output. Not a problem.
Go ahead, Tucker.
Another way that I see a clear path, but I've never tried it, but is that in NDI monitor, if you pull up an NDI input, it allows you to overlay another input, and then you can actually output the NDI monitor's full feed. So that might be a way to at least get into the testing before you go bite the big bullet and talk to Jeff.
And Jeff, with Sienna, is that something that sits both on your on-prem and in the cloud at the same time? Because you're talking about going back out to baseband.
It can be. Absolutely. Sienna processing engine runs on Ubuntu, so it'll run there in the cloud perfectly fine, or you can have it on premise. We use it both ways. There's advantages both ways. One is scalability in the cloud for just ramping up the speed as much as you want. Use it, pay for whatever you need. But then the other side is if you build a server that's adequate, you actually can have more performance on site in these days with like a AMD Threadripper type setup with Epics or the Ryzen's that are just a slew of CPU, because it doesn't use GPU at all. So by putting a really powerful server on site, you also get things that tie in like AS67, so you can bring Dante audio in and out. There's definitely advantages.
Great. Go ahead, Beju.
Jeff, a question on that. If you want to ingest into Sienna, do you need to have an instance of Sienna running locally on site, or do you have a separate contribution option into the cloud engine if you're running it into the cloud?
I guess I don't understand really, but what
Sorry,
do you mean?
so you said that you're running Sienna in the cloud.
Yes.
So if you want to send feeds into Sienna from somewhere else remotely, do you need to run an instance of Sienna engine on that site as well, or is there a separate contribution option?
There's multiple ways. You could bring in SRT. You could bring in NDI from NDI Cloud, which is another one of the Sienna products. You could also bring in RTMP. There's CDI now. That's another module that you can add into it. So CDI is the new format that Amazon made up so they could sell more bandwidth. And so that's basically their uncompressed version of doing it in the cloud. If you have, say, like the little link, you can send that up to Amazon, then bounce it over through CDI into there's a lot of different ways. And then the new Unite module is for more of a contribution type like this that you could bring in, and that is just running on a browser in someone's window. So then it's very lightweight at that point.
Yeah,
Okay, I was asking because I was looking at Bird Dog Cloud as well, specifically for they have the option that you can just run 2 nodes and you just connect them up basically. So I was wondering whether it was similar to that or it was a little bit more of a different way.
It is similar, but it's a little bit more on the broadcast level of not just one point to point. You could use Unite to do that, but it's more so about more channels and more higher end stuff, I guess you would say.
Next question.
Alton Christensen from Brooklyn says, before MacBreak this week, Alex stepped through the process of removing much of the Zoom text from a pinned or second screen feed. What were those steps again?
I think that it is. I think all we did is put it on second screen and then just don't move your mouse anymore. Most of it goes away when someone's coming in. I think that's all we were talking about there. Of course, we use rooms on ours. With rooms, with a person going out to a screen, typically you're not going to see anything other than the small connection icon on the lower corner. So that's all we see with rooms once we go out to that second screen. Go ahead, Tucker.
Jonas Chirag and I were doing some testing a couple of days ago and found that if you use, if you do a screen capture method with like vMix's desktop capture, and you select just that window as opposed to getting the whole screen, it actually takes away a lot of overlay.
Yeah, because we have zero except for that one little connector which is funny because it's the connection thing that no one cares about. So we still have this thing that is being put on there for no apparent reason. But outside of that, we have zero interface from the room's output.
The only thing we were left with was the name.
We don't get that if there's only one person in it. So if it's point to point, it will not have. If you're absolutely correct, if you have more than one person in there and you're pinning, you'll get the name. If you are a point to point, the name won't show up. That's why we do point to points and don't let other people participate. But if you're scaling past that little connection doctor icon, you will get rid of the name as well. Go ahead, George, and then Jeffrey, and then Chris, and then Jesse.
Alex, I know you've mentioned Teranex before. Are you using a Teranex for each individual one-to-one Zoom connection? So if you have 6 guests, are you using 6 Teranex machine, to scale?
No, we're using FS4s and FS-HDRs. So they have four 1080p inputs on each one. And so we're using those because they're more compact. And we have other needs that they provide a better. There's a bunch of things the FS4s do better than the Teranexes. One of them is audio delay can be done relatively silently. The proc amps are a little easier to access. And because we use HDR, we need the HDR versions to do what we do, because we'll take things like Zoom and promote it to HDR. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Chris, and then Jesse. Then we'll move on.
So if you're screen scraping to something like vMix or Wirecast or OBS, if you do the dual screen experience and you bring that second screen in and you full screen it, then you can zoom in on your box and that works there. But if you have a 4K monitor, what you can do, and you're only doing like 720, what you can do is you can split that screen in half, and that way the name gets below the video and then just doesn't show up in the box. And one more thing, and that is you can't mute on Zoom, or if you talk in the microphone, you'll get that big overlay that says that you're muted. The best thing to do is to hardware mute, or on some laptops that I use to bring in extra screens, I actually made a plug that plugs into the microphone, so it just completely bypasses it hardware wise.
That's great. Chris, and then Jesse, and then we'll move on.
On my little Zoom room setup that I built here, if you mute your microphone, there's an extra icon in the corner. It's a big, ugly microphone slash. And what I ended up doing is I set up a dummy audio device that has nothing into it, and I don't have to mute it. And I say, look at that mic. So it's not getting any noise from my production room here, production room, corner of my apartment. But the icon goes away.
Good, Jesse.
Yeah, another trick is to rename people as _, and that's it.
Right, their name. Go ahead, Tucker.
There's actually space characters that they did not account for. If you use space, it doesn't allow it, but there's a thin space that you can get the Unicode for, and it actually does just a space. You just have a little gray slice.
That's great. All right, next question.
Sorry, Alex 4D Gollner from London, Europe, or England. YouTube have announced today that their YouTube Spaces, studios where creators can go and learn video production and do live events in Berlin, London, Los Angeles, New York, Paris, Rio, and Tokyo, will not be reopening. Comments?
I've worked in a lot of those spaces. They're beautiful. I think that it's time. The need for it has passed. The YouTube creators have access to tools that are more accessible and easier to use and just as powerful as what was in the spaces. The spaces, for the most part, in my opinion, were vastly overbuilt. So they were using, lava, like they did incredible, carbonite boards and and all kinds of just heavy. Everything was heavy because they had some integrator come in and really do it, and none of the creators knew how to use it. So they didn't use most of the core data. They just wanted the rooms. They just wanted the rooms and some of the cameras, and so that was the thing that we saw over and over again. Like, we came in a year after the LA one was done. I think we were the first ones to activate it as a live, like activate a true live event from it, just because no one else knew how to use them. And so. I think that they had a great theater. They had a great culture kind of building up there. But I think that the need for them has passed, and I think that's why they're using this as a soft way to just kind of step out of that overhead. Jeffrey, and then Tucker, and then Sky. Pretty quick. We're going to have to move faster.
Yeah, it was very location based. I couldn't use it from where I was to go there. And my understanding is that they're switching it up, and now they're going to be doing an on the road type thing where they'll be coming to your town and showing you how to set up your space.
Yep, go ahead. Sky?
I was at the Santa Monica space when it first opened. It was a tremendous education. It was early days. It reminded me of the very high end version of the original cable channels and things like that, because these people were coming in. We didn't know what we were doing in this new world, but the education that they were offering was ahead of this. So in some ways, it's a sad day, but in other days, we can do a lot of this online now.
Yep. Go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity to fill that gap with basically spaces that are well lit and well isolated and don't have equipment other than that. That's the big need right now, I think.
Well, and I think that there's going to be a market for spaces that are ready to be part of centerless events. Like ready, like they're all tied together. That all the stuff is built so that they can immediately be activated with good cameras and interaction tools and the ability to have, I still think that what we're going to see is the end state for these events are going to be the speakers are all over the world, the viewers are all over the world, the production staff is all over the world, and there's not any center to any event. And that's where that atomization of that is where we're going very quickly now. And so I think that studios that cater to that are already pre-wired or pre-configured to work with each other is going to build kind of the next generation network of studios. And these weren't the ones to do that. Next question.
Chuck Wojciak from Concord says, what are the settings that should appear once Zoom has enabled HD for your large webinar? Client's account trying to be sure HD for attendees is enabled for next week. Request to Zoom has been made.
You should see a button that's in the web page that says Enable HD for webinars. If you get 1080p, you'll see that in the actual webinar creation. So when you start creating it, you go down to the bottom and you'll say Enable 1080p for all attendees. That means you've been approved for because you can get to because I don't think that there is an in between. I don't think there is a 720p for attendees. Is there? I mean, I've only seen it's like 640 by 360 and then it's 1080. There is a 720 version.
There is a 720 as well.
All right. Yeah. So, but Enable HD is what you're looking for in the web settings, and then the 1080p will be and it'll be Enable HD also in the webinar.
Yeah, and then just check your statistics in the settings, and it's kind of fun when you see that those 1080 numbers pop up.
Yep. Next question.
Next question is from JJ McKenna, and he says, since office hours has been around for nearly a year, have you collected good data on what characteristics are most effective for an online call-in show? Number of panelists and their skill sets. Note, do you have an inventory of the panelists' skill sets?
I don't. It's very organic who shows up, and it flexes each day. I mean, we're getting, you'll notice that we have a lot more technical questions around events because we're talking about AWS today. And on Tuesday, we'll end up with more sound people. The most dramatic one is on the education on Saturdays. Like half the panel changes when the educators show up. So, and that's the goal. The goal is that different second hours drive different participation. For this show, what I have found is generally if the panel gets smaller than 15, or the attendees get smaller than 100, it's a heavier lift. It just feels more sluggish. And so that's something that I kind of take into account. And it's why if we don't get higher numbers in the evening soon, we'll probably merge those into the Wednesday and Monday into something the same because it's not enough on either one right now. Next question.
Dave Chalmers from Glasgow, Scotland says, anyone had a demo of Sienna Unite remote contribution system add-on to NDI proc engine? Claims ISO, audio and video, but not WebRTC. And there's a link there.
We'll have Jeff answer it real quick, and then we'll move on.
Sure. Yeah. Definitely do have a demo of it, and actually a few of my friends and new clients have got it out there, and we are pushing forward more and more of it. It is not WebRTC. It is using WebSockets and other protocols in order to create a very fast ingest and a very fast contribution type of scenario, and the return back works just the same, is effectively under the latency of WebRTC. It's at WebRTC or under, but the advantage is you get a dedicated NDI video and audio out of the engine, so then you could do whatever you want to do with it at that point.
That's great. Next question.
This references something that was said earlier. James from Dublin, Ireland says, so how do you set up and use Zoom's interpreter channel for audio return?
We've talked about the possibility of doing it, but because of the way we do Zoom, we don't need it. But you could, interpret. The only problem with it, I think, is that the interpreter will show up for everybody, in the Zoom room. So using it as a return means you are returning that audio to everyone, which is usually not the way we want to do returns. But essentially, you can set up multiple channels in Zoom. And we do have ideas of where we're going to use this in Zoom for other things. Like if you're watching an event, you could theoretically be hearing comms or mics or other things, and you could decide which one you want to listen to. You don't have to make them interpreter channels. But basically, that's setting up it for interpreters is, I believe, in the event setup. And then you can set up the languages that you want to support. But you could, I don't believe that they're custom. You can custom name them. You might be able to now, but that's been a big push, is to custom name them. Next question.
Edwin R. Ruiz from Chicago says, I ordered the Pyle headset and the TechRise USB Sound Adapter a few days ago. Roscoe gave the excellent advice of pulling the jack partway out, and it worked. What options exist for making this connection more long-term with an adapter?
You need a mono to stereo adapter. That's what's missing it's a mono going into what's expecting for whatever reason, a TRS. The new TechRises, for whatever reason, are now expecting a TRS as opposed to a TS connection, and that's what's causing the short that isn't working. So if you get a TS to TRS 1/8 inch jack adapter, you can just push it all the way in. Then it should work good. Tucker, real quick.
Yeah, you may have to check the pin out and make sure that shorting the two things that it's going to short when you get that adapter doesn't cause an issue, though.
And I'm going to order one of these, or order a combination of these, and we'll test it to see what's what, and whether we can find one that works the way we expect it to. Next, I don't know why they did that. Anyway, next question.
Alex, I'm going to have to step out pretty quick to something, but I'll read this last one. Oh, I'm sorry. I hit one that was for AWS, second hour. George Kennedy mentions the Rode SC6L for Clubhouse. Tell us how it worked out. I want to use it with the MixPre DPA and a DPA 4066.
George?
I'm going to do it real quick. All I did was take so you're taking the output from the MixPre and put it into the device, and that's about it. It works fine. I haven't had any issues. You just need to make sure you pull that where it says direct monitor. You just need to pull that back so you don't get any kind of noise from the MixPre. But it's pretty straightforward and it works fine.
There you go. And Bill, can you take over take over questions? Okay, next question.
I missed the mic check because of my technical issue, but hopefully I sound okay. And yeah, I'll be happy to. Sam Greenwood's in from Toronto. Who are good AV focused YouTubers? Note, I apologize for dropping off the panel. I was literally falling asleep in my chair. I think we've been there.
Who do people like? Go ahead, Ken. Ken?
Yeah, Curtis Judd. If you want super technical, real detail, Curtis Judd. DSLR video shooter. Gerald Undone, again, super technical, really goes deep into the stuff. And the other guy for really fun, Potato Jet, is also good.
Good, Sky.
Casey Neistat's been around for a long time, big proponent of all things tech, and moved from New York in that experience. to Los Angeles, and so he's bi-coastal.
You ahead, Beju.
I'll add Churchfront. Even if you're not into a house of worship, their reviews and their explanations for a lot of the basics and also a lot of different price points is a really good way to understand how the workflow works. Then you can really spread out and go into more details on the gear.
Our own Jeffrey Powers has his own channel that you can definitely check out. So definitely check that out as well. Joseph Lanashki, Aaron Parecki, those are all folks. DBE Store does their own too as well. So definitely check those out. So there's a lot of good sources within our group as well. Next question.
James in Dublin, Ireland is in next. And James says, can the panel recommend a power over Ethernet switch for 4 cameras NDI setup?
Yeah, go ahead, Tucker.
Cisco SG350 is a really good option. Jeff will probably say, I'm not sure. Jeff?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say right now, SG350s, that's probably the better choices. It is, and the other is the new Netgear 3500. It's their new series. I forget the other part of the number, but they have a very good series that's targeting this market. And so they're doing their back work, which is good.
And if you want to go all the way, check out Juniper. EX2200s are fantastic switches.
Jesse, real quick.
It's actually the Netgear 4250 series.
Yes, Jesse. Thank you.
Yep. Great. Thanks. Next question.
This one comes in from Thomas Chans, and Thomas says, I have a Sony LMD 350 that doesn't give me the resolution I need for my feeds, which is 640. I would like to use it for scopes. Is this something I could run on Raspberry Pi to do, or do I need another computer? And what else would I need to employ this brick?
I think you'd have to find a Raspberry Pi scope. Scopes. I think that would be the challenge. Is I don't know if there's anyone's making scopes on it for Raspberry Pi. Yeah, go ahead, Tucker, real quick.
I would check out using something like the B-Link for that.
Next question.
Moving on to George Kennedy here on the panel. George says, office hours just switched to a Pocket Cinema 4K, and every day I paint it and lose its settings. Any idea?
Are you saving the switcher settings? Or you save as set or save settings every time you leave the switcher? Because it should keep the camera data, George. I mean, mine does anyway. It used to not.
Yeah, but I'm saving it. I'm not sure what is going on, but I'm gonna.
Now, are you turning off the camera?
No, the camera is on. But I suspect. Well, when you save, is it saving it back to the camera also? It's just saving it to the ATM.
No, it's saving to the ATEM. It's not saving to the camera, but the ATEM is the ATEM is driving the camera. Bill, real quick.
If you power down the camera and you power it back up, it will forget, but you can restore settings and read in the last group that you set. I have to do that every morning. That's why I go black and come back up.
Yep.
So if you power it down,
make sure that you're the latest one. The latest update seems to be saving the camera settings for me. It wasn't before, and suddenly it started. So I don't. The one that came out right after the Extreme came out because I had to update for that, and the Extreme seems to be saving my settings. Next question.
Right, thanks.
Eddie Scott, Mission Viejo, California says, why does Alex L video have a gray cast across the bottom 5%?
It's a new kind of graphic that just gives it a little bit of this little gray graphic down here. It's all designed to just create a little bit of a fuzz to. No, just kidding. I always trying to make the camera as close to the monitor as possible, and sometimes I just don't see it, and I adjusted every time you'll see it pop up. If you see it pop up, it means that it's the first day that I've had it since I moved the camera again, and I just missed it across the bottom. It's easy for me to miss, but that's the reason it's there. Next question.
Next, we come up with Jason Robertshaw, says in Sarasota, Florida, what's a good Zoom chair? Fantasizing about a seat that combines a Streamdeck and gaming chair so that the functional controls are on the seat itself or with integrated mic inputs.
We were talking about it last night. We want to put a replica, but with a Stream Deck, but have a replica of the USS Enterprise for the director, and just sit up there and say, and just give it some Stream Decks and make it so. Anyway, so we think. Does anyone have any specific chairs that they like? Real quick. No.
Talking about chairs is like talking about religion, so be careful.
Whew, it's all Aryan. Anyway, so next question.
Moving on.
best ones.
Yeah, the Herman Miller Aeron is kind of the classic. They're very expensive.
They're still good.
They're fabulous. I've had one underneath me for 15 years and never had a problem. Tyler Darlington, San Diego, looking for a layout app that extracts the base layer from the alpha layer in an HVEC encoded video. Looking for 2 HDMI outs, similar to what is found in H2R Graphics.
I forgot that HEVC even carries the alpha channel. So it has an alpha channel that's passing through it, Tyler?
Yes, it does. And I mean, it's 2019, WWDC 19.
Yeah.
They talk about it, and it's each channel is addressable. So I just don't understand why there isn't. I haven't found an app, or that's why I'm asking if anyone has one where it will extract the base layer or the key from the fill from the alpha layer, like H2R Graphics does with PNGs, but they just don't have playback of videos, because I do all my animations in motion. So I want to play out an HVEC that way.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
HVEC does something weird with depth map. In fact, I think that's how the depth map gets integrated. The only way I've ever had to do or been able to do this has been with not video, but stills. And I just do it in Photoshop. I set up an automation to just separate it. So I don't see why it couldn't be done similarly with a similar workflow in post. I'm not sure how to do it live.
That's an interesting problem. Yeah, we haven't even considered. You do a lot of HEVC, but it's usually considered as a distribution platform and not as a work platform. So that's an interesting puzzle. Yeah,
I think with compressor they just added a preserve
alpha
transparency.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that's something for us to test. I don't have an answer. It's good. It's interesting. Next question.
Mark Harder, Bedford Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, says, been excited and looking forward to the AWS setup day. Last minute life happened. Please ensure that YouTube happens for that. And thanks for doing that. So it's actually just a request.
Very good. There's a lot of questions for AWS. So
yeah,
brace for impact. I've never seen one with so many questions. So, anyway, go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, regarding the number of questions for that, this is a speed run. The speed run takes about 40 minutes. So just a heads up on that. So we're going to have to kind of, the questions may need to get spread out over the 4 weeks just to make sure we get to them.
And I think that, what I would say is that let's take a look at it. Oftentimes what we found to be successful is the questions oftentimes are, the conversation, even if we have to stretch the conversation out a little bit, it makes more sense to stretch the conversation out and answer the questions, because what we want to do is try to fill what they're dealing with right now with AWS more than it. And you guys can let me know what you think. I mean, I would lean towards even dealing with the questions before I got into the demo, just because it clears the deck a little bit, before we get going. And that's up to you. You guys got to let me know what you want to do. But I would talk more about that. The way that we can definitely do the demo. I mean, it's just that I just, it might mean it might be better to handle a bunch of these questions and then get into the demo. And if we don't have it, we're given 4 weeks to go through it. So let me know what do you guys have an opinion about that? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot. Yeah, go ahead, Guy. Guy looks concerned.
Well, because we've rehearsed this a couple times, and we knew that there'd be some interspersing of questions along the way. So there are a few lull points where we can drop them in. So we'll push as hard as we can. The idea was that by the end we actually have a video pushing into Zoom from the cloud, and so we can make a run at it. And if it has to wait till next week, it waits till next week.
Yeah, I mean, let's see what the questions look like. Let's go through the questions, and then again, if we need to, I think that we'll do the demo first, and we'll see what we do. It's in the future, if we do that, I think that what we want to do is just put up a video of the demo so people can watch it ahead of time, and then do the Q&A. But we'll if it's that wired in, if we know that we have 40 minutes that we have to cover it, usually that's when I want to package it into something, as opposed to demoing it, live. But let's go ahead and just do that. I don't know how to. I guess I can give another. Sorry, I'm just trying to think about I didn't expect so many questions. I think that was the thing, is that we just have a lot of people really
You and
interested.
me both.
So, I mean, the reason that we had a pretty good plan, I think, and I think that the issue that I have right now is that we have a lot of people that have come and asked questions, and I think that we want to make sure that we address those, because those are kind of people trying to solve a bunch of things. I would even be open to, it's up to you, I'd be open to doing a general AWS, Q&A this week and do the demo next week, unless you have 4 weeks of content that you think is going to be needed for that. Go ahead.
Tucker, why don't we take it up to the spot where we get Teradici popped open, and then we'll see where we're at from there. But let's take it just to half it.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. We can definitely start there. Alex, the plan is based on the desire to have that. I think you stated, of wanting to make sure that we start at the very beginning and crawl all the way through. Yep. Mm-hmm. So we can definitely skip over some stuff if we want to go that route.
The crawling is the more important part.
Right.
Get people through the setup.
It's a bit tedious, and that's it does have breakpoints. So there's breakpoints where I've got to wait 5 minutes for something to take place, and that's a great place to inject questions. Yep. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's answer this last question, and then we'll start with that. And I'm going to put another tag in that's just called setup, AWS setup, and that'll be kind of tagging the questions as something separate than a general AWS question. It's an interesting puzzle that we have here that we haven't. All of the stuff is an experiment. We've never done it before. We've never done 4 weeks in a row on a weekday of doing this. So we're still figuring it out. Anyway, what's the last question, Bill? And then we'll go from there.
Paul Wallace, our friend from Austin, Texas, says, if anybody on the panel is good at lidar scanning with an iPhone, could they demo how to do it? That could take a little bit of time.
It's probably let's
need screen share.
Let's create an hour on that. So I'll put that into the notes for an hour of lidar scanning with the phone.
Tucker's going to need lidar. Screen share. Tucker Dragoo for screen share.
And we can hear you, Guy. So Tucker can hear. So anyway,
he's with us.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so let's go ahead and change the direction. I'm going to add another tag for your questions, AWS setup. Oh, yeah, setup. And if you have something that's related to what is being talked about right now, tag it as AWS setup. If there's already a bunch of second hours, I probably wouldn't ask any more general second hour questions. I'd really focus on the setup questions, at least for now, and then we'll get to some general questions if we have time at the end. All right, go ahead, guys, take it away.
Yeah. So the big thing is, how do we get a production up there, and why would we want to even do cloud-based workflow when we have computers on the ground that can do the same thing? And I think Jeff said it best with the power, the scalability, and the cost. A lot of people think that cloud is expensive, but it really isn't. When you're running stuff at 71 cents an hour, it's really reasonable. So don't be intimidated by thinking you need to go get the latest and greatest $10,000 setup from Puget Sound Systems, even though I love that computer that they have for Resolve. You don't need that for this. In fact, Keenan was asking, I don't want to run a PC. It's like, I'm running Teradici with my Mac Mini M1 that was $699, and it's controlling a very powerful computer up there. So when I think of Keenan, I think of he's using StreamYard, and it works great for him. But what's that next level? House of worship, sporting events, musical performances. So I'm trying to look through the participants and figure out, what do people really need? Like, why would you want to do this, and why do you really need it? And Jeff's just been such an inspiration doing these huge events where it's like, not only can you not go to Best Buy and buy 150 computers, but what are you going to do with them when you're done with that event? You got to tear all this stuff down. And what if you could just push some buttons that just say spin down, spin down? So Jeff, you want to talk about some of the other reasons why we might want to go up to the cloud and some of the productions that you're working on?
Sure. Yeah. For me, it came back to that scalability thing is the biggest part of it. And it happened again last week. We started out with a contract of providing 50 machines. Then it ended up being, hey, by the way, can we go ahead and spin up another 40 just to cover everybody on site? And this has happened multiple times already. Once the end, I guess you call it the end client, sees the abilities that you have in the cloud, it really starts them thinking, it's like, well, why do I have all this out here? and it really has transformed a lot of the people in this space that I've kind of found myself in. Working with Blue and Grant about it's Tony Robbins, MLMs, and other groups that are basically doing their virtual conferences in a one-to-many, but they're using the interactivity of Zoom to be able to do it. And that's the key, and that's why it works in the cloud, is because you're using the same power that you would have in a Zoom meeting, but you're just having a lot of Zoom meetings. And some of these might have specific reasons to have, like they may have groups that are underneath, like kind of like the employees type things. It's with MLM, it's kind of structured like that. So there are people below their line, and so they want their people with them in their meetings, so they can have segregated, just separate little conversations if they wanted to, or they could watch the main flow. The other side of this, besides these meeting situations, is sports. Is they've seen the light. Without a doubt, they've seen the light. Recently, in the fall, we worked with a company called Drone Racing League, DRL. Actually, we built a complete, worked with them and built out a complete workflow in the cloud. It's based around Sienna processing engines and also SRTNs from their remote pilots, as they call them, or their players, into the sim that was also hosted in the cloud. And then they mixed it out to multiple vMix machines to create the broadcast, which ended up on NBC. That's phenomenal. You never would have thought this would be happening in 2021, 2020, but it happened in 2020, and it was on NBCSN at first, and 2 weeks later, they were actually on NBC. That's a huge change in workflows, without a doubt.
And with a lot of us working from home, having two internets, like I'm lucky that I actually plugged in and got a second internet connection. I mean, that just reassurance of having stability up there. Like when we went to play the remotes play out, I could have done it from here. I've done it a couple times where I just play out of vMix, but having that reassurance and an iPad here that's connected to cellular as a total Hail Mary. Like if if everything goes, and I think Jeff has talked about before where he's had to cut in from a phone, I think it was. Didn't you have to do something in the field where you controlled
driving down the road, and I had one of those situations like we needed to fall over, and somebody else was. We lost a landline on one of our operators. I was driving down the road. I pulled over. Yeah, I didn't let the Tesla drive at that point, but I pulled over and fired up the laptop with my cellular data off my phone. I started with my phone, and then I had to get my laptop to actually do it, and I cut a show for 30 minutes. And that's the kind of thing, if we had hosted that all on his site, which we had the capability to do, but he only had one internet connection. Whenever it went down, it was down. There was nothing we could do about it. He did not have, at that time, this was well before COVID and stuff, so we were really on the bleeding edge. But with it in the cloud, the stream keeps going, the production keeps going. You may be stuck on a camera you don't want, which was the situation we had. But we had it on, luckily it ended up on a host. So the host was able to keep going until we were able to log back in. But that was one of those things that you have that redundancy in the cloud. That's just amazing to be able to leverage that for your productions.
So yeah, scalability, we've got cost. Another big one is just being able to pass the duties over to a remote worker. So I know, Jeff, you put up a LinkedIn video of a woman in the field being able to take that job that would have been in the studio into her home and then use Unity comms. And that was F1 Racing?
Yeah, there's a lot of them that have already done that. A lot of it came about because of COVID, but they were able to continue working. They didn't have to go into the venue or into the truck, the OB truck that was on site. They were still able to keep working. We've been doing that for years ourselves, and spreading that workflow around. And the event we did, one of the events we did last week, the main guy was in Austin. I was in Florida. And I was overseeing his production at the same time, working the backside of the engineering side. And then they had, it was 12 different people from all over the country, and there were a few there in other countries too, that were all coming in. The same virtual thing that we're doing for virtual meetings and stuff, but it was a distributed workflow that it didn't have to all be from one place. So we were able to get people working from different applications and in the different applications in different locations.
All right, so Tucker, you ready to pop open screen share and let's go to town?
Okay, here we go. So I'm going to do this very, very quickly. When I get to breakpoints, I'll let the guys know, and we can start to take a few questions, move in. As soon as we're past the breakpoint that I have to wait, that I have to hold down for, which is things, there's certain things that take about 5 minutes to just happen on AWS's end, then that's a great time for a couple of questions, but I'll butt in as soon as that time's passed so we can keep moving.
Yeah, and
All right.
one of the things is just make sure to ask questions of what Tucker is just talking about. Just put that in and make sure to tag it as setup so that we know to jump those questions in as we go forward. Go ahead, Tucker.
Okay, here we go. So this is, it was asked to start at the very, very beginning, aws.amazon.com. Come here, hit create an account. I'm not going to do it right now because I'm not going to enter my credit card information in front of you all and my address and everything else. But this is where you start. You go through that process. About 24 hours later, you will have access to your AWS infrastructure. This is the AWS Management Console. When you first log in, this is where you'll be. In here, you've got all the AWS services that they have, which is absolutely amazing. The one that you want is EC2 in the upper left-hand corner, and we're going to click there. This is Northern California, and I have very, very little going on in this environment already. I do have a key pair. You would have 0 on everything. So the first thing we're going to do, and the goal here is to get to a running instance. So this is absolute bare minimum to get there. Throughout these 4 weeks, we're going to talk about some very specific things, and we're going to build on this infrastructure. And the end state will be that we'll have a vMix instance with a couple of contribution instances feeding to it. So NDI over the system. So here we go. I'm going to click instances. When I get into instances, it has an instance state running filter that's already on there. There's no instances in this environment. I'm going to click launch instances or launch instance. When I get here, I'm going to go ahead and go to AWS Marketplace. So this is the AMI functions, and these are all vendor AMIs that exist in the system. In this case, because this is a production system that we'll be using for actually actively switching, I'm going to use Teradici. So I'm going to, in the search box, type Teradici. I'm going to hit enter. We have several different AMIs that we can choose from. In this case, we're going to choose Windows Server 2019 because all our software runs on Windows.
And an AMI is basically, this is a instance of a computer that is sitting in the cloud, right?
Yep, absolutely. So this instance type, this AMI, is compatible with G4DN and this variety of the G4DNs, XL, 2XL, 4XL, 8XL, 12XL, 16XL. The prices for those are listed at the right-hand side. The Teradici portion itself, the remote access for frame accurate, full color, really, that remote access solution is the Teradici piece of this. The software costs 50 cents per hour on top of the standard EC2 costs. And so you get the total at the right-hand side. Most of us run G4DN 4XLs for actual production systems. So that's what we're going to build on today. So I'm going to hit continue. I'm going to move so this is coming into choosing the instance type. It just showed us what instances were compatible. And here we've got a whole bunch of instances that are grayed out with a check with an X on them. I'm going to click filter by all instance families, and I'm going to go to G4DN. When I go there, I get all those G4DN instances. Here we can see the actual details specific. The G4DN 4XL has 16 CPU threads and 64 gigs of memory. One thing to pay attention to, whenever you first start out, you may not have access to 16 vCPUs. When we hit our first break, I'll go back and show you limits and how to make requests for additional limits. Okay, so this is a pretty powerful system. One benefit here is that every time I build a new one, it's on brand new hardware. So that's really cool. I clicked into the next section, and the next section gives us number of instances. We have a lot of options here. 90% of the time, you do not need to do anything with this section. There are placement groups that we would look at in the future, but right now we're going to stick with just the default setup and move to next. Add storage. In add storage, we have the root, which is our C drive. The root C drive comes up as 30 gigabytes off the bat. I'm going to set this instance up with 200 gigs because that's what I'm going to be using for my working instance. The ephemeral storage that exists here as a potential D drive, if you mount it, a huge, huge, huge note here. Do not forget this. If you mount this and you use it, and then you stop your instance, shut your instance down, that data is gone. don't do
Ask
it.
him how he knows. Ask him how he knows. Ask him how he knows.
I was
That happened
testing
to
and
me
I
too.
found it.
Everybody.
In testing,
Everybody
I found
figures it out.
There's a lot of people that record to that drive and then find out that it's gone. So don't use it. Or if you use it, know exactly how that functions. So that's a really, really big deal. Okay, so that's one of the first really, really big deals we'll talk about. There will be several. Okay, next I'm going to add tags. Don't need to. I'm not going to use this function. Jeff may use that. I'm not sure. We get
All
into
the time.
security groups. When we get into security groups, we have the option to create a new security group or select an existing security group. In this case, we're going to say we don't have a security group already there. Every time you create an instance, if you just skip through this, you're going to wind up with 100 security groups and it's going to get real hard to manage. I recommend coming in here and renaming this security group. And in this case, I'm going to call it Teradici Access. And any instance that I spin up from this point on, I'll use that same security group just for the base remote access. It has the security group is kind of like an additional firewall that's between your instance and literally everything else. We can get into that a little bit later. We will touch on security groups next week for sure in way more detail. We're going to review and launch. So in this case, we can review our setup. It's all good. So we're going to hit launch. When we hit launch, we have the option to create a key pair or choose an existing key pair. Most of the time, you're going to wind up, at least the first time, you're going to create a new key pair. In this case, I'm going to call this OH Demo 2 because I think I already have a Demo 1, OH Demo 2 key pair, and I'm going to download that. That key pair is required for you to get the administrative account password. So you have to have this. You usually will want to just use one key pair for all your instances. Don't transmit it over the internet. There is a thing where people hijack these things. Just it's a file that needs to stay very, very secure. So now we're in the launching instance, and we're going to take a look and see here in just one moment. It's going to pop up and give us a message. Cool. Your instances are now launching. There's a couple of things that can happen at this point. One is if you don't have enough vCPUs, it may come up here and give you an error and say, hey, you don't have enough available resources allocated to do the action you want to do. That's option one. Option two is in this data center, there's not enough instances of that type available. You can run into that. Making sure that you have workflows in multiple data centers can help alleviate that. And as your account gets established, you get better access to some of those things. So just a heads up on those. From there, I'm going to go ahead and just go to view instances. And now I've got this instance running and its status is initializing. So the system is being built right now. Right off the bat, I'm going to name it. I'm going to call this OH test vMix A. And I'm going to save that. So at this point, it's going to take this roughly 5 minutes to build the instance, and then it's going to go back and let's see, it's going to build the instance, and then it has a delay on how long it takes for that instance to report its password down, and we can't connect until we have that password. So at this point, I'm going to talk about limits really, really quickly, and then we'll open it up for at least a question or two. So whenever you first create your account, right off the bat, there's a button up here that says limits. I'm going to click that, and we get a whole bunch of limits that are basically applied to this account. And these limits and this configuration is specific to the data center. If you move to a second data center, you have to do all of this exact same work again to be able to be up in multiple data centers. So here I'm going to go down in my limits to running instances. In running instances, we have running on demand all G instances. That's the limit that most of us are concerned the most with. And in this case, I've got 64 vCPUs available in this environment. A lot of times with a brand new account that's unestablished, it's going to be 0. So you may have to come here and make a request. And so we'll go here. I click on all running on-demand G instances, and in the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to say review or request limit increase. I'm going to click that. This is something you should do really immediately whenever you get your account. Come in here, it's a service limit increase. They've already filled out everything for you to get started, and then you come down here to region. We're going to select the region that we want. So in this case, we're in, what are we in? Northern California, is that what we said? Northern California. Primary instance type, we're going to say all G instances. New limit value, we're going to say, typically I would say 32 or 64 vCPUs is what you're after. considering that this instance we just spun up is 16 vCPUs, you can apply that out and see what you're looking at. Cool, so we've got that. You can add another request and just stack them and make one request for all of them. This is opening a support ticket. In the use case description, describe your use case. Hey, I'm in virtual production. I'm looking to spin up these instances, doing this job. I've got customers waiting. I usually put in there that I'm considering using your service versus Azure, and that tends to get their attention. So that is what you do there. Once you submit that, you'll have an upper right-hand corner, support center. You can come down here. I'm going to just view all my cases so you can see I've got limit increases here that I've made requests for. And if I click in, you'll see the thread of this is our back and forth. Typically what's going to happen is that they're going to immediately give you 16 vCPUs within 24 hours, and then they'll review it for the actual full upgrade that you're looking for. So they try to alleviate the pressure pretty quick. Okay, I'm going to check this instance and see where it stands, and then we'll do a question. Status check shows 2 of 2 checks passed. We'll see if our password's available. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to go to security, get Windows password, password not available. Time for a question.
We don't have any new setup questions, so we'll just keep moving. How much time do we have? Do we want to answer just a couple questions?
Yeah, let's go ahead and answer a couple questions. This might take a few minutes.
Okay, great. Go ahead. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, we had a couple of ones, kind of just general. Cost of an AWS instance plus vMix, is it per hour or per day?
The cost of this is per hour. It is period billing, like it's short. It's down to the minute after the first hour. If you boot an instance and power it off, like if you boot it, oh, not that instance, power it off, you're going to pay for an hour. That's
how much is that hour?
It's somewhere between 70 some odd cents and depending on the instance type.
Gone.
In this situation, we're looking at In this
70
situation,
cents
we're
is
looking
gone.
at $2.
Not back.
Yeah, exactly. In this case, we're looking at like $2.50 somewhere around there.
And there
so
is
just
one called bare metal. That's the one you don't want to click unless you really know what you're doing.
Right.
Because it's into the dollars per hour, and it
That was
adds up
$12.
fast.
Well, the other situation is if you get into big environments like Jeff and I work in, it's really easy I need to boot all 100 instances. All of a sudden, that 1 hour cost starts to add up. So just be aware of those things. Set timers for yourself. Before you boot an instance, set a timer for 15 minutes after your show's over, and then 3 hours after that, because you need to validate that you have powered your instance off. It's very, very, very important. Storage also costs. So if you spin up 200 instances and then you use them for one show and then power them off, that storage cost can add up as well. Just a heads up. All right.
And then on the second part of that question, the cost of vMix, it's free for 60 days. There's a trial full featured to give it a run. There's also things like Livestream Studio that are free with the monthly. So we're doing vMix today, but you can also use OBS. So there are free things. So you can get in there for 70 cents and do this with OBS. So don't forget that it's not totally expensive. You don't have to buy these things right out the gate.
Yep, absolutely. And so our instance is now ready. So it took a few minutes for this part to take place. Now we're in the place where when I'm going to go back here, I'm going to right click on my instance. I'm going to say security, get Windows password.
Share screen.
Oh, did I stop? Did someone stop me?
Sorry, I stopped you during the questions there.
All right, so I've been right clicking on my instance and going security, get Windows password. And it has been going to that, you must wait 4 minutes or so. Here, when I did it, it came up and actually gave me the get Windows password, and it gave me the actual information I'm after. So in order to get the password for this system, I have to browse and go to the OHDemo2 PIM. I'm going to open that. I'm not going to scroll because I don't want you guys to have the whole hash. So decrypt password, there's my password. I'm going to close that. And I'm actually going to drop that in a text file over here to my side. Cool. So that's the password. Username is always administrator when it starts. So I'm going to now right click and I'm going to say connect. This is a trick that some of us use whenever, we'll get into this here in just a second. So RDP is going to be the way that I connect the first time always. So I can just click again. Let me make sure I said those words. Right click, connect, RDP client, download remote desktop file. When I do that, it's going to download an RDP file that I can just click on, connect, enter the password I just downloaded, and pass that through. Cool.
And for you Mac guys, you'll have to download the Mac version of Microsoft RDP.
Yep. So one thing about what we're doing is we are in Microsoft Server 2019. If you have not been in Microsoft servers operating systems, they are a little bit different, and installers that are meant for Windows 10 will typically install, but sometimes there's functions that don't take place appropriately. So just be aware, and that's where most people hit roadblocks, is whenever they first get into their instance and they hit these roadblocks. Networks always hit yes on this because it puts you into the public or into the private network security group, or I say security group, network settings. Private versus public versus domain. This puts you in the private. We get some good information in the upper right-hand corner that here's our host name, here's our instance ID, some stuff like this. Let me see where I am on my list. Push installers, cool. So the next thing that I'm going to do is this is the trick of AWS, of RDP. I'm going to go in and I'm going to go to I have a file that is called AWS Software Kit. And in that, I carry all my installers that I need. In this case, I'm just going to pull one file out because I want to show you some other stuff. But I am copying the Google Chrome Standalone Enterprise installer, and I am just pasting it straight here. While this happens, I'm going to hit Internet Explorer and show you why. Server, by default, and specifically these AMIs, are very, very, very locked down. You can go through and spend the 15 minutes it takes to undo all of these security roadblocks that they put in place. But I recommend against that and just connect with RDP and install. So we go through this, and then if I go to Google, I already can't get there. You're about to view pages on a secure connection. It gets very, very frustrating. Content blocked. That's a very frustrating thing to deal with. A lot of people get roadblocked there. When I go to download a file, it's not gonna let me download the file. So just install Chrome, move on from there. So while Chrome's installed,
there is another trick that a friend of mine worked out. If you go down to server management and then just turn off that functionality of IE, then you could use IE. I don't know why anybody would want to use Internet Explorer,
Right.
but you can if you wanted to. But Chrome is my first go-to. And there are some like the NVIDIA actual AMI. It comes with Chrome and also because we did Teradici here, but the NVIDIA one, it comes with Chrome and Mozilla already pre-installed.
Yep, absolutely. So while this takes place, while this copy happens, I'm going to go into Server Manager because I know that vMix needs .NET 3.5 installed in order to use it. And on Windows 10, this is a difference between Windows 10 and Windows Server 2019. So let's see. On Windows 10, whenever you go to install it, it will apply the .NET 3.5 update. On Server, it does not do that. So you have to do that manually. I'm going to come over to Server Manager. I'm going to add roles and features. It's going to say Server Manager is collecting inventory data. So this is, again, one of those things where you kind of go, oh, okay, I just opened it. I've got to wait a minute. So we kind of stack a couple of these things up. See, we'll get Chrome
Get a
installed.
couple different processes going here at the same time because this is kind of the waiting game. We might even be able to open up a question. Bill, if you're on deck, ready to pop one, this might be a good time.
Yeah, actually, I do have another one. Eddie Martinez asked, how many hands on deck are required to manage a cloud workflow, and where are they, and what are they driving or managing? He wants to budget for 40 break-arounds on a vMix EC2 instance, but in general, with a EC2 instance in each room. But in general, I think that's a question a lot of people are interested in. What's the minimum number of people that you think is required to manage this, even for a small event?
I can say from some of our events, small event 40 is not a small event. That's going to take 3 or 4 people at least, and you're going to take a lot of monitors. That's a key thing that we need to see. You need to see all these applications open. So we use a team viewer as our most common way of remote controlling everything. So I can have a window that is the 1920 by 1080 resolution that I set them all to, and then we just move the window down. We still see the full 1920 by 1080 in there, and then we just put as many as 9 or 10 on a 4K monitor, so we can see them all at once, and then add more monitors and more monitors and more monitors. I was able to do it in TeamViewer does tabs also, so you can have multiple tabs. I made a record. I did 17 tabs of 17 different machines this past weekend on my laptop, just because I was bored and I wanted to see how far I could go, and then TeamViewer crashed. So there's definitely a way of spreading that workload out. So in the last event we did with 80 plus meetings, we had 6 machines, I believe, on site, and each of those 6 machines were watching either 8 or 9 different actual meetings at that point. But then that could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be on site, because I have another guy that's off site that's working, and he's got a 4K monitor attached to his laptop or a couple of computers, and he's watching another 20 machines there.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. So for Eddie's workflow there, 40 breakout rooms, what Jeff said is exactly right. But, Jeff is the inspiration. He's obviously the big dog in the game, with Tucker. I just want to say, I work for a nonprofit, and we do, very, very small scale compared to what Jeff and Tucker do. But we have four guys that have Streamdecks and companions all set up, all remote. We have not met each other in person for an event for over a year now. And we do this all in the cloud. So, I just want to show that perspective that even as a single person or just a couple people remote, you can definitely still run a show in vMix Cloud without an issue.
All right, I'm going to take off again. So we've got, it's a great question, and definitely, I think our cloud production Discord channel is going to kind of go crazy after this. So ask those questions there also, because we have a lot more detailed information for you in those situations. So we're at the add roles and features. Server manager is ready to go for us. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and just click it from the beginning. Add roles and features. Before you begin, we're just going to click next. Role-based or feature-based, that's fine. We're going to click next. We're going to go, it's the only server that we have selected. So we're in server roles. We aren't installing a new role. We're adding a feature. So we're going to click features, .NET Framework 3.5. We're about to hit a roadblock, and I'm going to show you what it is. Let's see. Nope, we're good. Install. One or more pre-deployment tasks failed. This is something you run into quite a bit in this environment, is a service is not running. For security reasons, they do stop these down in a lot of these AMIs. This is the kind of thing that really gets people in a spin when they first get in here. Make sure you read the message and Google the message. In this case, the Windows Remote Management service is not running. So I'm going to click down here, and I'm going to type services. I want to make sure and highlight a couple of the roadblocks that people tend to run into as we go. So here I'm going to go, and I'm just going to click into services. I'm going to hit W, and I'm going to scroll down until I find Windows Remote Management Service. If we look here under startup type, it is disabled. I'm going to right click and hit properties. I'm going to turn on automatic delayed start startup type, apply that. It's still not running, so I'm going to right click and hit start. When I hit that, it's going to start that service. We're going to do this process again, add roles and features, next, role-based, next, go ahead and hit features, .NET Framework, next, install. So this is going to get started. While this starts, I'm going to go ahead and download the remaining information that I need. And this is where we get into another huge benefit of AWS. The pipe is massive. So I'm going to go to Chrome, and I'm going to download this file.
Tucker, just to let other people know too, this instance or this Teradici AMI does not always have the same thing as, say, for instance, that NVIDIA AMI or just a blank Windows Server AMI. I noticed that the NVIDIA already has that service running that you had to turn on.
Yes.
So there are small little differences, and yes, Google is your friend.
Yep.
Google or Tucker or Jeff or Guy.
Yep. So that was 830 megs. I don't know if you guys saw how quickly that downloaded, but it was really fast. And if you are getting content from a client, it's really nice to be able to go download, done, load it, fire it. Very, very cool. So I'm going to open this up. There we
Tucker,
go.
is the speed of that's going to be limited in part by the pipe you have into wherever you're working, right?
No, sir. That speed, the only thing that is affected by my pipe is my visibility into the system. And
that's right.
That's
So
basically,
it's the cloud talking to, I see. It's not, you're just commanding it to do something. It has nothing to do with how fast you command it to do it.
Exactly. And that's actually one of the huge things. I mean, you can tolerate failovers in a very different way. And you can tolerate, varied bandwidth situations. So here we go. We've downloaded the file. Cherig, thank you for putting that bit.ly together with all of these things already together. So we downloaded a video, NDI tools, vMix, and Zoom installer. I'm going to go ahead and at this point, let's see, we need .NET Framework to finish up. But while we wait for that, I'm going to right click down here on the Windows and I'm going to hit System. I'm going to rename this machine. It's very important that you rename your machines for later in the program whenever we get into NDI passing. You want these to have a name. So OH demo vMix.
And the reason for that is because NDI works off of a name basis. So if all your machines are named the same thing, then you just see the name and then you don't know, and you do see the actual NDI output from each one of those machines, but you don't know which machine it's coming from because they're all named the same.
Organization is key. And let's see. So I'm going to rename it. It says I need to restart. I'm actually going to hold up because I'm still waiting for .NET. And I'm just going to fill the time with installing anything except for vMix. You do not want to install vMix until the rename has taken place. So I'm going to go ahead and install Zoom. It's a habit of mine that I always right click and say run as administrator when I'm installing things. Had that habit for years. So we've installed that. I'm going to install NDI tools.
And NDI tools can be downloaded from ndi.tv for free. All you have to do is put in your information, or if you put it in before, they'll send you a link. That link is actually an evergreen link that always goes back to the latest, most recent version. So always nice to have that handy too.
So I'm installing everything except for the Adobe side of things, and this is for our friend Stuart, not the NDI HX drivers. Okay, next. I'm glad somebody got that.
I got it.
All right, we're letting that go. It looks like our .NET Framework is installed. I'm going to close that, and I'm going to close Server Manager. I'm going to go ahead just to take this opportunity to log in. Because
since this is going to be recorded, I would go back to what you just said about the NDI HX. I would install those just because I know something is coming.
There you go. Okay, I went ahead and logged into Zoom. I don't know if I set that to, let me sign out. I'm just taking this opportunity while NDI installs to get logged in so that we can hopefully shave 30 seconds in just a few minutes. There we go. That will help us out here in a moment. Okay, that is done. Finish. There's also a bunch of best practice stuff that we're kind of glossing over. We'll kind of touch on it here in just a little bit. Okay, I say in a little bit in the coming weeks. Okay, the instance is ready for everything except for vMix. I'm going to go ahead and restart now, and this is where we're actually going to go ahead and log in with Teradici PCOIP. So it's going to start. It's going to begin restarting. A note on restarts. Restarts are going to keep your IP address as it was, the public IP. If you stop it and start it, so if you shut the instance down and restart it, your IP address will change. So a heads up there. There are functions that I know Jeff uses, maybe no IP, free my IP, dying DNS. There's a bunch of options for kind of giving you a static endpoint that you can connect to. So just be aware of that. I'm going to bring this over here and paste it. We're going to copy that out. And so now I'm actually going to open up PCOIP client. This is the Teradici client. I'm going to say new connection. You'll download this. You can just search for Teradici PCOIP client. Host address is that IP address. Connection name is OH vMix. I think I said vMix 2, but we'll see. Next. Those connect in securely things that come up are because of there's no SSL cert on the server. You can go through the process of cleaning that up and getting certs in place. Since I know the system, I built the system. I trust it, but that's what those errors are when they come up, or warnings, I should say. So now I'm connecting with PCOIP. Really cool thing here is that all of a sudden, this does not feel like a remote system. This feels like the system I am. It feels like my computer. I would not know the difference. If you sat a tech down that was scared of the cloud in front of this and had them cut a show for you, they wouldn't know. Okay, so now I'm going to go in and I'm going to go ahead and install. Where did I put that? Downloads? Software for
You'll notice in the top right corner, the host name is actually now the new computer name. One of the things, actually, I copied this that I love about EC2. I copied this to all my desktops. I have the IP address in there. I have, you have both IPs, both the internal IP address and the external IP address, but it has a lot of those specifics of that machine. So at a glance, I know what I'm sitting at.
All right, it's starting to install vMix. So I'm going to go down here, and first thing I'm going to verify while this takes place, again, we're doing some things in parallel, is I'm going to check and see in the lower corner if the NDI virtual camera, virtual input is running. There's an issue that you can run into with virtual input where it crashes on start, and it's in a state that, I'm going to go ahead and just move through this. This is a standard vMix install, so nothing fancy here. What can happen is that virtual input can fail on start, and it's this yellow NDI icon. If you go to just rerun it, it's not going to, because it's already running, it's already active, but it's failed in some way. So I'm going to come here in Task Manager. I'm going to end the task. And Jeff, you may know a way to solve this long term, but
I know why it fails. It starts too fast.
Okay, so delay its start, and we'll.
Yes.
Okay,
that's exactly it.
Thank you. That is really, really great. So now we've got the NDI virtual input here. And we have no NDI sources available yet. We're going to have one here in a minute, and that's actually how we're going to get our audio back into Zoom here in just a moment.
Might want to click on that speaker down there in the right corner and turn on the audio.
So it will turn on automatically here in a minute, but this is a situation with the Teradici instance also where this service, the audio service, is actually not running at this time. It will auto start whenever it's asked for. But here, if I right-click and just hit sound, it's going to say the audio service isn't running. Would you like to? Yes. And so that's what he's speaking of there. We also need to do camera and our privacy settings. So I'm going to type camera. We get to the camera privacy settings. This is another roadblock that Jeff helped me out with early on, and I really appreciate that. You come in here, you turn on camera privacy settings. That allows access from applications. Microphone. Turn on the microphone privacy setting.
If you end up with a gray blank or nothing in your Zoom as a video input, check the privacy settings.
Yep.
Ask me how I know. Many times.
Yes.
Learning through scars.
All right. So we are now at the vMix registration portion. Register for a 60-day trial. I'm going to go with 6 at Good.io. Bang.
And this is the full version of vMix at this point. For the 60 days, you do have access to everything that's there, which is quite nice. But if you are going to use it for gainfully employment, pay for it, please.
They've done amazing things.
Working.
They've been incredible to our industry. Please support them. This could just as easily be OBS or Livestream Studio, or there's a ton of different workflows you could use. You could just be running VLC and turning it around into the cloud. So there's a bunch of options here. So I've got vMix running. I'm going to go ahead and fire up Zoom. And while Zoom fires up, I'm going to, perfect. Okay. While that happens, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go to my external. I'm going to go to external output settings. we want to make sure that we take advantage of the quality we have available to us. I'm going to uncheck streaming settings. I'm going to change this over to 1920 by 1080. And I'm going to go ahead and change this to 30 frames per second. Cool. There's some other best practices. Let's see, restart vMix to apply changes. Not yet. I actually have one more change I need to make. And that is I need to expose my audio outputs via NDI. This is getting into vMix stuff, and that's a whole nother conversation, but this is going to get us into a good spot for what we're about to do. Cool. So I've got vMix set. I'm going to go back into here, grab my video, drop it in.
Now, Tucker, why didn't you expose video out? Did you?
In this situation, I'm using the external for the virtual camera.
Oh, that's interesting.
So boom, external. I actually, yeah, anyways. Cool. So there we go. Zoom is running. I'm just going to go through and do. So I'm going to have to stop the screen share here in a second, but I want to make sure that I've got my inputs as I expect them. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. I'm going to select vMix video, check HD, get rid of mirror. There it is. I'm going to go to audio. I've already got audio input on the Teradici virtual driver. Let me see. Check 1, 2. That's my voice. Okay. So my voice is being passed up via Teradici, so that's not what we want. So I'm going to check line input NDI audio. It has nothing at this point. That's because my virtual input does not have a source. I'm going to select the vMix audio master. And I'm going to go into audio mixer, and I'm actually going to crank this up a bit. Okay. All right. I'm going to restart it. I've got to stop the share now because when I join this meeting, it's going to go into a video feedback loop if I don't. So I'll get all the way up to that point and then I'll stop the share. So Mickey, will you get ready to stop my share and then get ready to spotlight this whenever it comes in?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead and stop the share. Thank you. And go ahead and spotlight it. While he does that, I'm going to go ahead and turn on original sound.
The infamous bunny.
We just won't watch the post credits video. Not family friendly. There you go. Somebody can check stats and let me know if you're seeing 1080, but you should be.
Just from the hair detail, we are. That's my guess.
So I'm gonna go side by side here, and I'll switch my camera out to show this. It'll take me just a moment. So you can, I don't know if you want to do double pen and add me to this, but there you can see Zoom on the left. Let me go to gallery there just so you can see that. So that's it. We've got vMix running in AWS. We're taking advantage of the fact that it's completely redundant. It's got the best internet connections available. It's completely, I don't know. It's a very, very good way to go. And then on the left, we've got our Zoom instance. Thank you all for your time.
And you notice that there's just a little bit between Tucker and I that we probably have very similar ways to get to the end, but we still have our own little ways of going. I would have just taken NDI out of vMix directly into the Zoom. That's our normal workflow. I wouldn't have used the external out. Granted, I use vMix as a tool. It's just another tool. To me, it's a 9/16. I've got a 1-inch wrench over here that I use a lot more often with the VisVector Plus, but it just kind of depends on what you're trying to do in the cloud. There's a lot of different options out there, but the general idea of what we wanted to do is try to give you a direction of this is the way to get started. The bottom line is we built a machine in the cloud that is just a machine. and then you can install whatever software you want on it, short of Mac software, because Macs in a cloud are very hard to do. If you want to go down that route, prepare to pay for your Mac several times in that month, then you can do that on Amazon now. They have an AWS instance that you can run, and it hurts. It hurts a lot. So I suggest finding some other Mac. Weren't you using one, Tucker? Aren't you using the Mac Stadium as a host?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So
George, you have a
there are other
question?
people out there.
George and Courtney, real quick, and then we're going to jump to a couple questions.
Really quick, Tucker. Overall, great presentation, guys. Tucker, I know you took a different route for the video and the audio sharing from vMix, but that solved a lot of issues for me right there and then. So thank you very much.
That's great. That's great. Courtney?
If you want to install your own software that you have locally on your machine, how do you get it into the cloud machine if it's not on a website? You know,
Google Drive. Google Drive or
Right.
Dropbox. We sync. Actually, we sync all of ours, or an S3 bucket, which is another part of AWS, and we use that as kind of our massive storage capacity too.
Now we're
And the other side of it, whenever I first started, I showed you that I connected via RDP and I just did a copy paste from my desktop. That is the lowest friction way when you first get started to get content into it. So that's another option.
Now we're going to go into a lightning round of what we can before the end of the hour, and then the challenge for everyone is really to think about trying to build one over between now and next week. We will. I just want to prepare our guys. We will start with questions on the next one, just to like what people have been doing, the questions pertaining to the setup. So what we want to do is really have you think about this between now and next week. Try to build one. Write down, and my recommendation is you open up a notes app and you write down what comes up for you while you're doing it, and so that you can ask questions next Friday. Go ahead, Tucker.
Yeah, next week specifically, ask any question you want, but next week specifically, we're going to be talking about getting remote things into it. So we're talking about SRT into the system, vMix call, some of the other Guardian apps, some other ways to get content into this single instance. So that might be a good place.
And what we'll be looking for is questions pertaining to, at the beginning of the next hour, is pertaining to last week. Like you played with it for a week. What are your questions that are coming up? And then we'll go into the external pieces and then try to answer a couple questions at the end, and then we'll do exactly the same thing. Go ahead, Jeff.
So once you've built this and you spin it down, you spin it back up in a couple of minutes. Once it's up, you're back where you were. Can you also spin that up multiple times and have essentially the same configured machine?
You can. Jeff has more experience with doing like big configurations and stepping through that. One thing you can run into when you do clones is that you can run into licensing issues. So
let's jump into a couple questions, Bill.
Actually, not licensing, but close. How does AWS handle Windows updates on instances? Is it automatic? So do you have to have your own licenses? And
good.
So Windows license, it's one of the great things is you no longer have to manage your Windows licenses, because that is just part of what you're paying is that licensing. So you don't have to deal with that. As far as Windows updates and things like that, it is full server, and with full server, you are able to defer all updates or accept updates as you want or do them manually. Plenty of options there.
Go ahead. Next question.
Eddie Martinez says, what's the best method for ISO recordings of breakout rooms on AWS? Do you need a Zoom EC2 instance in each and every room? Pin and co-host privileges with the ability to record? Can you avoid co-host level privileges and still record the breakout room?
Yes, you can. To the last part of the question, as far as week 3, we're going to really get into pushing content and pulling content from multiple different machines. So that's where we will really get into that. But the answer is yes, for the most part, an individual EC2 instance. But ask Jeff, ask me. This is the things that we engineer for people.
Next question.
Eddie Martinez, Sacramento, California. Please describe the audio chain for a single guest on a unique Zoom meeting and how they are brought into a webinar with a larger group. Are 3 EC2 instances required like this? 1 guest Zoom instance, 2 Zoom webinar instance, and 3 a vMix instance?
That is a good configuration for that. We each have our own ways of doing it. And effectively, yes, you do need an individual instance per in that workflow.
Next question.
Eddie Martinez of Sacramento is back right away with a vMix license level. Can the free version accomplish a cloud workflow? Is the $60 level license required? I want to place a sponsor logo watermark in each breakout room. I'm thinking I can use the $60 vMix license for one instance plus a second EC2 Zoom instance.
Sure.
I would say you could start with that. I mean, the 60-day free trial, that's a great way to start to figure out what features you actually need. What we found after doing that, after a lot of testing, is the 4K license was a great balance for us because that gives us a few vMix callers if we need to, but we predominantly use Zoom and ingest that. But the key thing for us was the outputs, so the NDI. So we can have different auxes, if you will, going to different places. So you can only have a maximum of 4, but the 4K license will get you that. So I would say, look around the 4K license.
Next question. Go ahead, Tucker, real quick.
The free version will do it. The $60 version will do it. You'll probably want to get into the 1080 version if you're doing that workflow. If you're just trying to add a bug, I would consider looking at just using the NDI Studio Monitor, using it to add the bug, and then looping that back in.
Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle in the panel here. What's the value of choosing a specific data center?
Region close to your client, to the majority of the people that need to connect to it is one consideration. That's most of it is just getting
also
close.
your control too, because the closer you are to the data center, the better your experience is going to be. I know whenever I'm working on our clients that are over in Dubai or maybe down in Mumbai, that is not quite as snappy as working in Virginia for us for some reason.
Each of the data centers equally distributed? I mean, equally equipped?
No, absolutely not. Matter of fact, we just had to move my client that works out of the Bahrain in Dubai. They're in Dubai. Their closest is Bahrain. It took a long time for the Bahrain to ramp up to where they got to where they could use it with enough G instances and hardware, because those G instances are built. If we ever skipped over that, I think we kind of did. G means graphics, so it has a graphics card available to it. And so the G instances are very rare, and they're building them as fast as they can. But the Bahrain was tapped out. They didn't have any more instances. These guys are using 50, 60 machines, and they're doing a lot of heavy stuff with the Gs, so they had to use the Gs. We had to build, and basically we were building a second system for them with the Sienna processing engine and other tools. We actually had to move that to Mumbai to make sure that they had enough. And they were in Dubai, but they were using Mumbai because that was the closest one to them with available resources. And Ohio, in the summer, Ohio was hit really hard, but they don't have the same kind of data as what, say, for instance, I'm in Virginia. Majority is Virginia, and then the West Coast, it would be Oregon, would be the second choice I would have. But it does make a difference on what's available in that system. And that's when you do those service limit requests. Sometimes they have come back to me. It's like, we don't have the resources available. Please use another data center.
Next question.
Ramesh Lineage of Colombo, Sri Lanka. What's the best recommendation for a workflow for the live editing of a show being produced on AWS, where camera feeds are all being pulled into AWS? Editors are located remotely and thinking of AWS storage solutions for files. What's the best way to get their final videos back into the production?
I'm predominantly in the live event workflow, so I'm not in the record for edit. Go, Jeff.
Definitely the Sienna workflow is the right thing to be doing. That's exactly what they're designed for. They're bringing in multiple sources and then also recording them to drive, and they could be growing files. So you could just have an editor on another machine, another VM, and that editor could just be doing what they need to do is edit, and then actually turn around, if it's Premiere, looping that back into a live workflow too. Also, it's elaborate though. It's not a simple solution.
Next question.
John Preto, Las Vegas. Tucker, can you run a speed test on the instance so we can see the upload and download speeds?
And while Tucker's doing that, let's go to the next question.
And moving on from there, AWS second hour is the Comms Plus AWS question. Inside a venue with ClearComm and Unity server, I need to give access to Unity to outside people, but can't get a static IP from the venue or the ports open. I've heard of PepLink, PepWave combined with AWS workarounds, but I don't know the details. Any insight in that?
There's not really a way that really doesn't have to do with AWS per se.
Go,
It's
Tucker.
more about comms.
I'm muted. Speed test came back at 1.6 by 990. I think I shared it, but it may not have shared well. But as far as that question, let me pull up the question again real quick, because I read that earlier and thought about it.
Hamachi would be the way, right?
PepWave. PepWave, the way that you would do this is that you would, if you're using a PepWave, you do a Speed Fusion hub in AWS. The Speed Fusion hub is an endpoint. Whenever you make the connection, you do your port forward from Speed Fusion through all the way to your machine that's on site, your Mac that's on site. That Mac could be anywhere in the world. It's going to have that IP address that's of the Fusion hub, and so you solve your problem that way. I've done it many times.
That's great. Next question.
Dirk Brewer in Guatemala is in with, during the time the instance is in standby for a day or week, how does AWS charge for downtime?
You do not pay for it.
Nice.
The place
Wait.
For the compute.
You don't pay for the compute, but you pay for the storage. Yes, you do pay for the storage.
So the rental fee continues for the storage. Okay.
Sure.
Chris Russo, Red Hook says.
Okay. Keep going. Next question.
Chris Russo, Red Hook says, how do you delay a program like NDI virtual input starting on boot?
I'll put some notes in the Discord. It's a long story.
Next question.
Eddie Martinez in Sacramento. How does or can the Sienna NDI router work in a cloud workflow? What does it do? Can it manage multiple instances pushing out NDI?
I know we've done this in the past, but let's couch that one after we get to the end of this and give Jeff another second hour to talk about Sienna. Are you up for that, Jeff?
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Yep. Next question.
I'm sorry about that. Things were not working for a moment there for me. Michael Sweeney in Chicago, do you have any to install and build a new configuration for every new production in AWS?
I do a lot of engineering specifically for like, hey, I want to do this one thing, and I have a lot of discussions regarding how their current workflow is, how to migrate that up. In that situation, I do wind up building new quite a bit. But if I have a consistent workflow, then yes, it's the same one. I boot it and use it. Chirag's got some options there too.
Sure.
No, exactly. So in our workflow, we've actually created 5 instances, and we use them all the time. We have not actually changed those instances at all since we first created them. So you can definitely reuse.
Next question.
Moving on to Greg Gibson. And Greg says, why did Tucker need to install vMix after he renamed the machine?
That's because vMix, one of the factors of how the licensing gets tied is the machine name, also underlying hardware. So we had to make sure, and because otherwise I would have gotten a demo license, renamed the machine, that license would have failed. I would have had to get another demo license.
Next question.
Ramesh Lineage is back with, has anyone had experience with building things like virtual sets that run on AWS instances with stuff like Unity? What sort of instances are recommended? Would single GPU virtual machines be enough, or multi-GPU virtual machines be what's needed?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Single GPUs are fine, but you have to have a lot of them and distribute your workflow. Not using Unity, but my client is definitely using higher end Unreal. They're using Ventus, and that's all happening in the cloud. Absolutely.
Next question.
Ramesh, once again, with what are the panel's experiences of handling things like replay on the cloud, Amazon Web Services, when the operators are remotely located and communicating via Unity and so forth? Are there things like start end markers that can be passed to help with the sync for the main operator?
Haven't done this just recently. Well, not that much recently. I guess it was 1st of January. The key to that is just the user interface itself. So using Teradici, so it's fast. It's like you're sitting at a machine. The amount of time that you have to prepare a replay is way more than what it takes for you to be able to hit it and press go. Your audio cues from Unity, from your director, it's just like you're working next door to me. I couldn't care if you're in the truck down the hall, or if you're across the country. It doesn't matter to me.
Next question.
Jesse Jennings, Norman, Oklahoma, asks, is there a simple way to make sure you don't accidentally incur a large AWS bill, or does Amazon help if that happens inadvertently?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Do they help? No.
they help you where to put the credit card. Like here's
they are
you might
very
have missed this.
particular about that. I had a problem that happened, and it had to do with that. I am bitter about that Mac instance because I built it out, and you had to have a host. And this is why friends don't let friends use Macs. I built it out. I made a host. That host was actually not running, but you couldn't see that because it wasn't in the instances, so it wasn't live. And I got stuck with a very large bill after it ran for a month and a half before I caught it.
Oh no.
Yes. And they basically said, well, you agreed to the services, and they will copy and paste that same text. Just it's like a knife in your back, just going in there, just ripping it every time. And it was like, yes, I know, but your system didn't let me know it was running. And so there are ways, but to back up, there are absolutely ways to use CloudWatch so you can actually see what is running. And that's exactly what Tucker has done probably, and I've done myself, is I know that after midnight, it will send me an email if I happen to be up. I should actually make it call through on my phone no matter what. That's my next step. But if you're if you are left running certain instances, you can actually tag them by instance, by tag. That's how I use tags a lot. So if I have stuff that's left on, I'll know. At least by the next day I could turn it off, but I don't want that to happen again. That was hurtful. Very hurtful.
Really fast. George, Jonas, and Churg.
Yes, be careful with the Mac instances. I got a $2,000 bill, and I'm happy to say that Amazon did forgive most of that bill only because they saw I wasn't using it. So be careful with the Mac instances. It will bite you really hard.
Jonas and Churg.
On that note, Tucker, you should demonstrate how to turn it off.
Yeah, we'll show that. Go, Churg.
Yes, so I was going to say what Jonas was saying. Also, real quick, if you are in viewing the region that you haven't installed an instance in, it will look like there are no running instances. So Tucker probably can demonstrate that real quick as well.
We're running really low on time, so anything we can't just zip through, we'll probably do it. But Tucker, if you can pull that up, that'd be great. Next question.
George Kennedy of Washington, D.C. Jeff, why should we have AWS instances allocated on the East and West Coast?
Simple backup redundancy.
We've actually, not with AWS, but we've had other CDNs come down on the East Coast and not on the West Coast, and so so it does make a difference. Next question.
Michael Sweeney has our last question posted. Do you have to install and build a new configuration for every new production in AWS?
And we had covered that a little earlier. So their stop instance. There you go. And then yeah. Great.
I'll bring up one thing about this screen right here. This is not a live update. So don't trust that.
Right.
You have to go up to the top and click the little reload.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Make sure sometimes you may start things and they won't show up, or you're thinking they're not working, but they actually are. But the same thing happens. You may have thought you stopped something,
right,
and it could still be running. So hit the little reload button all the time.
Outstanding. All right. Thanks, guys. That was amazing. So really well done. Obviously well prepared, well put together. I'm glad I stayed out of your way. So for the most part, I can see some worry there. So I'll keep on staying out of the way. But we do want to make sure, as we plan for the next one, is to have Q&A for the first 15 minutes. And it'll be important for people to, number one, is stay focused. Do what these guys have worked on. If you don't, we'll answer other questions, but they're going through these demos, and we're going to talk a lot more about AWS. If enough people get involved in this, Fridays may become AWS day for a while, so it's just a matter of getting everybody up to speed, but we have to see movement. So people actually doing it, talking about it on Discord, talking about it here. So if you're building it, again, a notepad or notes or something on your computer, write down what's happening as you're doing it. You'll forget half of the questions later. And so write those down. Come here and again, you can ask them on Discord, but if you want to bring them up and actually discuss them, ask them next week at the first 15 minutes. And then after that, the guys will walk through stuff. If there's still time, we'll answer a couple questions at the end. But otherwise, we'll stay out of their hair and let them do their great work. That was fantastic. So I think we'll just keep doing that. But be ready also to ask questions when they have those little load times and stuff like that. That turned out really well as far as a good time to throw in a couple questions and discuss stuff. So, so for Tucker, Guy, and Jeff, incredible work. Like just really, thanks for putting all the work into it. It's obviously well thought out. So really, really.
Is
well
anybody
done.
else feeling like you're in the general store in the front of the Oklahoma Land Rush, and somebody's telling you about this new thing that's going to happen, and you're either in it or you're not in it?
Yeah. So I think that it's worth getting ahead of this for people. Get through those things. Chirag, thank you for coming to it. You weren't. I don't know if you're part of the presentation planning, but it's great to have you here with your input. So hopefully you'll come back again next Friday and join that. And George and a lot of the other folks that are doing this. Thanks for your input on it. I think that it's fun to have the whole panel. Very useful to have a kind of a wide range of those inputs. Very valuable. So so I think it's important. Again, I expect us, O9O, to be moving more and more into the cloud. We still have a physical presence because of some of the stuff that we do that can't be done in the cloud right now. But I'm going to be jumping on this as well. So I'll be kind of learning it all with you. Anyway, that's it. We're going to jump into the post show. Running a little late, but thanks everybody. We'll see you tomorrow morning. It's the long day, so get some rest tonight. I know it's Friday night, but there's not really any bars open, so just go to sleep, get some rest. We'll see you tomorrow. All right.
Or you can come to Texas.
We're still here.
Mind blown.
That was awesome.
Oh,
absolutely. I have
seen
it's the future. No doubt.
And it's now. And
well, for some of us, it's now.
Well,
for the smart people.